Today we are going to use some stale bread or day-old bread, and I'm going to tell you how I have used this, the idea of stale bread in so many ways through the years. So I hope you'll get a lot of tips and tricks, and you'll be able to learn a couple of ideas to save more money. Well, I'm Miss Katie, and this is Heritage Ways, and I encourage and support homemakers in their high calling of making and keeping a home. Primarily, I like to cook here at Heritage Ways, so that's what you're going to see most often. All right, I want to share first of all this cookbook with you. This it's not just a cookbook, but it is one of my top resources to share. Now, I don't refer to it nowadays because I've got so many of the tips and tricks and recipes memorized. But this book is just beaten up and dog marked and earmarked and dog-eared, whatever they call it. But I've marked it with pencil and pen and all sorts of ways. But this book, I will drop in the description box down below this video the title of the book, the ISBN. It's a 1996 book by Rhonda Barfield. It's called Eat Healthy for $50 a Week. Now, like I said, that's 1996, but I have just worn this book out, and I highly recommend it to you, even if you it's not 1996, obviously, but I highly recommend it. You could probably find it at Thriftbooks. I can drop a link for that down below in the description box as well. Now, this is where I first, my mother taught me to be frugal in different ways in the kitchen, but this is the first time I learned how to make croutons with stale bread. So what I have here is a whole loaf of Italian bread, and it was given to me. And there's so many ways you can use stale bread or day-old bread. So let's talk about that briefly. Some of the obvious ways you can use stale bread would be French toast. Okay, you really can't even make French toast with bread that is not stale or with bread that is not really thick and dense and hearty. You could make French toast casserole, or you could make French toast itself. Even if it's Italian bread, yes, you can. You can also, and I'm thinking too, if you didn't want to use it in your home, you can use it for your chickens, for birds, wild birds. If you have bird feeders, the squirrels like it. So I have a bird feeder outside my window, and the feed that the squirrels don't steal, I have beautiful birds out there, and sometimes before we got chickens, I would put some stale bread out there. So feeding the wildlife. You can also make sandwiches, grilled sandwiches if you have a panini, or just the old-fashioned. You don't have to have a panini press, but you can just make grilled cheese or some sort of a grilled sandwich, which is perfect for this kind of thing. Or just toast, because you're toasting it anyway. All stale bread is bread that has moisture that is evaporated from the bread, from the product. So that is what you're doing when you put bread in a toaster. You're removing the moisture and crisping it up. All right, so all those things, but today I want to show you briefly how you can have croutons. You can make your own homemade croutons. You don't have to buy them in the bags. I don't know what the cost is nowadays, but it is much cheaper to use this. This is 1.5 pounds of bread, and you're going to see it makes a lot of croutons. That's why I have a big bowl out here. But you can use it to make croutons, but even further, you can do two other things. You can use the croutons, of course, in salads, but you can also use the croutons in place of the sliced French bread that I talk about in the French onion soup recipe. I have been in restaurants, ordered French onion soup, and they put croutons on top instead of the sliced bread, and then the Swiss cheese on top of the croutons. It's not my favorite, but it is easier to eat sometimes than a big slice of the French bread that's on top of the soup. So there's an idea. Also, some people like croutons or bread pieces in their soup that's not French onion soup, but just in like any other kind of soup. You can use the croutons in those two ways, but also you can make stuffing, like stuffing for your chicken and dressing. You can make a stuffing mix with your homemade croutons. Also, you can take your homemade croutons and put them in a food processor and make breadcrumbs. Also, you don't even have to necessarily take the step of making the croutons unless you want to. You can just put the bread pieces in a food processor and make breadcrumbs. I would recommend putting them in a baggie, a Ziploc baggie or a plastic baggie, and putting them in the freezer, labeled, always labeled. Here's my oven ready for the croutons. Always label what you put in the freezer. Unless you're unlike me. I don't remember, what does that look like? Because once it freezes, it doesn't look always recognizable. So there you go. So you can make croutons, you can have your stuffing mix, you can have your breadcrumbs, all from this one loaf of day-old bread or stale bread. Years ago, and I know they still have these stores, but there used to be day-old bread stores. Sara Lee or whatever company had these bread stores, and I used to go and just stock up on all the things. I mean, bread and bagels, and a lot of it was very usable and fresh. So anyway, those are some ideas. So let's jump right in, and I'm going to show you how to very simply, and I'm going to make just basic croutons. So how I'm going to make the croutons is I'm going to chop these bread pieces up into cubes the size I want. I don't want real large cubes because I just don't like large croutons. I am personally today going to use the result of this when I make these croutons. I'm actually using them for a recipe, a chicken casserole recipe that calls for croutons. And that's what I'm going to use these for today, so I don't want really big pieces. Then you're going to see me use this same knife, y'all. I hope you don't get tired of me talking about this knife, but it's truly my favorite these days. I think I've mentioned it in the last 3 videos I've done because it is the Nakano knife, made in Japan, and this particular one at the time of this taping is on sale, and you guys get a 20% discount if you use my link and my code until May 15th of 2023. So I just love this. This one particular knife is so versatile, and I'm just in love with it right now, so I'm using it for everything. After the bread is cut into the cubes that I want and it's in my bowl, I am adding oil. Now, I typically don't bake with olive oil. I typically only reserve that for non-heated recipes because it does change a little bit. Olive oil does change a little bit in composition when you heat it. However, I know all the famous cooks and everybody on TV and all the shows, they use olive oil. So whatever, it's your choice. I like avocado usually. Today I have plenty of almond oil and olive oil. So today I'm going to use olive oil. So you want to toss the oil with your bread cubes. Now it's important to note that I'm not talking about molded bread. So if somebody might be wondering that, day-old bread or stale bread is not molded bread. It is just bread that is not fresh and soft. It's also important to note that you can actually you don't have to have a hearty, dense, or a sturdy bread like French or Italian or something like that to make croutons. You can use just sliced, run-of-the-mill, store-bought white bread as well, or wheat bread. Whatever bread has gone stale. and is not molded. So it just has less moisture in it, so it's less soft. You can even use, leftover bagels. Just use your creativity to make your homemade croutons. All right, so after I have tossed this, you can season the bread cubes. This is where I'm probably only going to add just a little salt and fresh cracked black pepper. You're only limited by your imagination and the spices you have in your cabinet. I mean, you can use garlic powder, you can use Italian seasoning, you can use onion powder. I mean, just whatever seasonings you would like to try to use for croutons, you can. If you need inspiration, go to the grocery store, and the next time you're at the grocery store, take a photo with your phone if you have a phone that takes photos, or jot down on a piece of paper the flavorings of croutons, and you'll get some ideas, Italian croutons or Caesar croutons or whatever. That is how I get a lot of ideas and have through the years, is going to the grocery store and looking to see, what do they sell? What have the folks who run these, who have big food companies, what have they done, and what can I replicate at home? Okay, you don't want the pieces saturated with oil, and every piece is not going to be completely covered, and that's fine. If you saturate it with oil, you're going to have some icky mess, so that's not okay. But just, I can't give you measurements on the amount of oil to use, but as you can see, I just drizzled it, stirred it. It helps to have a wider bowl like this, so you can have better coverage, and you don't have some soaked and some don't get anything. So as you're stirring, it's actually going to disperse the oil a little better, and so I think this is just fine. Then I'm going to put the cubes on a baking tray, or more than one tray, kind of an even layer, one even layer. And I am going to bake them at 350 for about 20 minutes. This is very easy to monitor. You just take it out maybe at 15 minutes or at 25 minutes or whenever, and just see if it is crispy to your liking. You can always keep or collect leftover, say, end pieces of bread or anything like that, just leftover odds and ends, tidbits of bread. Put them in any kind of a bag of your choice. I save these bread bags, and put those pieces in the refrigerator or freezer. And whenever you have a lot of them, you can either make croutons, or you can just whiz them in the food processor to make breadcrumbs. You can make stuffing. I definitely always have a bag of leftover cornbread and leftover biscuits and leftover stuffing, or leftover bread, and so that I can make stuffing, or dressing as we call it. So those are just other tips of ways you can save money, be frugal, and be better stewards. To store the croutons, you want them to cool completely. That's very important. You want them to cool completely, and they would probably be fine in an airtight container on your countertop or in your pantry for, I'm not going to say how long. It really depends on how much moisture was removed from the breadcrumbs during the baking process, and also whether or not they were cooled completely before you covered them up. But I will say this: they will stay in the fridge for a while, but they will last in the refrigerator the freezer rather, for a long time. So you can put them in a labeled Ziploc plastic bag or a plastic bag. You can put them in a jar, whatever makes you happy. I will say too that you can also recycle. You don't necessarily have to go out and buy plastic bags if you don't have them. How about using bread bags with twist ties that you already have? How about double bagging, just in case there might be a little hole in that bread bag? I grew up, my mama saved bread bags and twist ties and all the things. And we even, as a side note, a funny way that we used bread bags was in the wintertime, in the rare time it snowed in Tennessee, Mama would put use bread bags on our feet. I think she would put it like inside as waterproofing our feet inside our boots or some such thing. So that's funny. I would like to hear down below if any of y'all have any more tips on money saving as it relates to whether we're talking about bread bags or croutons or stale bread. I would like to know that down below in the comment section of this video. I really appreciate your watching. I have a lot of printable recipes over on heritageways.com, so I would encourage you to go and check those out. I'm Miss Katie with Heritage Ways, and I hope you're counting your blessings.